Well, good morning. How we doing? Good. Thank you all so much for coming out to this first, hopefully, of many parent equipping meetings for CHC. We're so happy to have you all here and have your kids back there enjoying their time with some of their friends. Well, we're going to have an awesome day today. Cindy and I are so excited to just do this with you, to get started on this new adventure, this new journey. So first of all, we just want to say thank you for trusting us. For those of you that were with us in CC and that we've made this change over to CHC, thank you for your trust. We don't take that lightly. We're like, wow, they're trusting us with this. And we want to steward that well and really take care well of your children and their education and the journey that we're all on together. So I'm going to tell you a few things, then my husband's going to come up and pray for us, and then we're going to get started with our morning. So first of all, I want to introduce our tutor team. So just give a little wave when I say your name. So for the first time ever, we have a pre-grammar class, which is our threes, fours, and fives. And so we have Ms. Morgan Barnsley taking that class. And she also does our play and learn and our PE class, which you're going to hear some more about today. Let's see, next we have Ms. Holly Burns. She is with our little ones, formerly ABCs, but now Scouts. That's right. Oh, so Skippers, Scouts. We're all going to learn some new lingo this year. So your age is 6 and 7, I think, 6, 7, 8, right around there. There's a roster on your table, everyone. So the roster's on the table, so we can look at that in just a minute. In fact, I'm going to grab mine. And then next we have Ms. Michelle Kelly. Give a little wave. She has the Navigators class, and they are 8 and 9, I believe. There's a little overlap there. And then lastly, we have Ms. Kelly Welsh for our captains. Yay! And they are 9 and a half, 10, 11. So that's our morning program. And then our afternoon program, which is just so funny. It's called The Adventurers. So Ms. Kelly Williams is leading that class. That's our writing, grammar, and math. But it's really funny, you might just hear us say UGLA sometimes, because it's Upper Grammar Language Arts. So that's UGLA is the short for that. So that is our grammar tutor team. We also have Nana in the nursery, and it's her job, and she takes that very seriously. Yes, and Jordan Shaw will be in the nursery all the time as well. So she's about to have a baby any day. So, and then Cindy and her team will be in charge of the dialectic and the rhetoric program. So very, very exciting. It has just been a joy working with Cindy. Those of you that know Cindy, she is just a joy and a delight to work with. And so we've had a lot of fun working this summer. We've worked hard this summer, but we've had a lot of fun putting together this program. So we're super, super excited. And your tutor team could not be better. Let's just say that. I'll try not to embarrass them. But they are the most amazing team of tutors, and we're so grateful for each one of them. So, all right, that's our tutor team. And then just to give you a quick update, we are in the almost final process of getting an LLC so that we're an official business and company, so that just provides some safety and some clout for us. And so that'll be coming soon. We have spiritual covering through our husbands and some of our mentor friends, my sister-in-law. We have safety covering from Cindy's husband. He's going to be here this afternoon to walk through our safety plans with us, which I think are really important in this day and age. We did family interviews for all new families. And everybody passed. We have waivers, and we have our family covenant. So we have some things in place, which was Kelly Welsh's wise word of just making sure that we had some good coverage as we separated from CC and started into something new. So just wanted to let you all know that those things are all in place. We're open for any questions that you might have about any of those things, but just wanted to tell you that. And let me see. Okay, so today we entitled it Parent Equipping. So I know we all know what the word equipping means, but let me give you the definition. It is to supply with the necessary items for a particular purpose. So today, we want to supply you with some necessary items for the purpose of homeschooling, right? And our mode is classical Christian community. So that probably brings up some questions. And so if you've peeked at your agenda, there are we have 7 sessions. 6 of them are questions that we're going to attempt to answer. Not that we're experts, but we're going to attempt to answer them through presentation and then discussion, table discussion. And then we're going to have a safety talk this afternoon, and we have some fun raffle items, and then we're going to have lunch together, and hopefully provide some times of discussion. In no way could we cover everything that we need to cover to get us ready for the school year, but just know that Cindy and I have more information forthcoming. I do a big old parent letter, and I'll mail that to you, so that'll have some more information, and there's a few more things that we will definitely cover before the school year starts. So just wanted to let you know about that. And the goal, ultimately, that we want to share with you is that we would be educating our children joyfully and restfully unto the Lord with our foundation in Christ solid. So we're going to be speaking to that today, and I wanted to ask my husband if he would come up and bless our time, and then I'll introduce our speaker.
All right, let's bow our heads and pray. God, I just thank you for your presence with us always. Especially, we thank you, Lord, for the new thing that you're doing. Even for those of us who've been in community already for maybe years together, we thank you that this year brings something new. And God, with that newness, we just enter joyfully and excitedly into all that you have for us. We don't know all that this year is going to hold, Lord, but we know it's going to hold good things because you're good. So, Lord, we long for this year to be equipping for our kids, that they might be equipped in greater ways to be prepared to enter this world and shine for you. God, today we just come together and we long to be equipped together as we ask questions, as we seek you on and remind each other why we're doing what we're doing, Lord, that we want to be influence our children for your goodness and for your glory, and that we want to be the primary influencers of our kids so that we can shape how they interact with the world and how they can ask questions wisely and reason together about who you are and who they are in this world. So God, just use this day to prepare us well in joy and excitement for all that you have ahead in the year. God, strengthen us for the year ahead. And Lord, we just look forward to all the fruit you're going to bring in us and our kids as we take this journey together. I just thank you for every tutor, for every parent here, for every family represented, and for all that you would do in this community through each of them. We love you, Lord, in your name. Amen.
All right, and I just wanted to mention I'll be getting water out in just 1 second. There's water, muffins, coffee, and tea. Help yourself at any time. Obviously, check on your children at any time. And we do have some breaks built in, but obviously, I think everybody knows where the bathrooms are. Maybe some people don't. So let me just point them out. Through the kitchen, to the right. Okay, and there's a water fountain there too. And then there are another set of bathrooms back in the kids' area. So anything we need to say otherwise about the raffle, or we'll get to that later? All right, we'll pass them out before we do the first one. So, okay, awesome. And then if you didn't hear me say this, I do want to have everybody fill out 1 sheet per child that's in any of the grammar programs, okay? And then if you could just give them back to Cindy or I, we will get them to the tutors. Or you can hand them to the tutor directly, but yeah. All right, so at this time, I'm really excited to welcome our speaker, Becky Repp. She is my sister-in-law, and I just had to say that because I'm so just blessed by her. 8 years ago, we had this conversation about classical education at my kitchen table, and I still remember it. I don't know if she does. But she was explaining it just like I could explain to my kids how to tie their shoes. Like, it was just super easy for her to explain, but in my mind, I'm like, I don't understand these 3 stages. Oh my goodness, this is so complicated. But she understands what she's about to share with us. And so I wanted to just thank her for coming today. And she just graduated her last student just this past year. So she's in a different season of her life, but she wanted to come share with us about classical education. So Beck, I'd love to invite you up to the front to share with us.
The PowerPoint, which is a big deal for me, because I'm so bad at all that kind of stuff. I got home from taking my son to college yesterday, and to be honest with you, I did a lot of my notes in the car. It was a long drive. Well, he's at Grove City, so we had, like a 4.5-hour drive out, 4.5-hour drive back. My husband said, "Do you want to talk to me about anything?" And if not, he just put his earphone in. But I got home last night, and I was like, I'm just going to push myself and do a PowerPoint. So even if it's not that impressive, I realize that, okay? But it was still kind of exciting to me. And I'm going to talk about, I went through a term, there's just a term that I love. It's called productive struggle. And you're all going to experience it this year. And your kids are going to experience it this year. Way to start off strong, right? But I went through productive struggle last night, and I'm excited about it. But I can't see it. So I'm going to be kind of like going over here, adjusting my slides. So sorry if I move a little bit. I guess I have to stay at the mic, which is hard for me because I work with children all the time, and I like to move, and I'm going to ask you to respond and give feedback. I don't want to just sit here and have you listening to me the whole time. So I hope about our next half an hour, 20 to 30 minutes is helpful for you. I have graduated 3 children through homeschooling. That does not make me an expert, right? It just means that we did get through it. And one's working on her nursing degree. One is out at Grove City, still to be determined what his major will be. It's been about 3 things. The other is not going the continuing education track. He has learning disability, and he, he's a learner. He's still a learner, but he wants to go in the Marines. So that's his journey, right? And we all know that. I'm sure most of you have realized by now with your children, unless they're maybe still really, really young, they are on their own journey with the Lord, right? You have a tremendous job, but what this end goal of these years of education, what they might seem like they're going to look like to you right now, could be very, very different as far as what your children decide to do. But as Ben said, and the goal of your community is to equip them, right? You're all equipping each other, and the goal is to equip them to do what God has called them to do. Besides my 3 children, and I've spent the last 20 plus years doing that, but I have done a few other things. I am an evaluator, so long before I even started homeschooling, I had a friend say, "Hey, you're a certified teacher in Pennsylvania. I want you to evaluate my children." I had no idea what that was. At the time, I'm not even sure that I was really thinking of homeschooling because I was a public teacher. But, so I've been evaluating for many years. I consult with parents because part of evaluating naturally becomes parents just needing somebody to talk to, needing help and guidance and direction and curriculum. I also am trained as an educational therapist. So really my focus now in my life is working with students with learning disability. So that's kind of what my next career is. But I've been doing that for a few years. And really God equipped me to do that through having a child with learning disability. I think I'm married to Rachel's brother. I'm just trying to make sure. She said, "You have to tell some things about yourself." Which always feels funny to me. I do have a Pennsylvania certification in teaching. I taught just for 5 years in Dallastown School District. I taught elementary school. And really, being a teacher, being a learner, right, that's what brought me to classical education. Because when my daughter was ready to go off to preschool, that was a big deal. And I was like, well, do I really want to send her to preschool? I better research. And literally, I remember still sitting at the computer, learning about classical education at home, and just light bulbs going on for me. And then it's just been a journey since then. So maybe you've done some research yourself. Some of you have been involved in community already, classical community. I love to get to kind of know you as I'm talking at you. But so who has been involved in a classical community up to this point? Okay. So a little over half, it looks like, right? And who's brand new to classical education? Okay, wow, quite a few, good. Of those of you who are new to it, have you had some discussions with people about classical, read a book, done some research yourself? If you haven't, that's fine, I'm just curious. Okay, good. All right, well, we're gonna go a little bit through the classical methodology today. And Rachel, we already started to, right? Because Rachel gave you some terms of your age groups, right? Your levels. So you were learning new grammar today. And so when you go through the learning process, we're going to talk about this, we all go through these stages, okay? Classical education is a methodology of learning. You've probably heard of the term the trivium. Trivium is Latin for 3 roads, okay? Now, when I was thinking about that last night, I was like, man, they're really, I get it, obviously, but there are 3 levels, I would say, but when I see 3 roads, I kind of see them separate, but somebody who's visual probably sees something different. There's more of a converging, right? And I'm going to show you a graphic in just a minute that shows that. Actually, Ben, would you go to 3? Let's just skip out of order and look at this real quick. So here we have the trivium, the 3 roads, or the 3 paths for learning: grammar, logic, and rhetoric. You've probably heard those terms, and let's just try to delve in a little bit deeper into what are those terms. The reason I loved this graphic is because obviously you can see what happens there, right? The convergence. So when I was thinking 3 roads, I actually think very concretely a lot. But this was a better visual to help me, I think, and to help us understand it, because we're converging, right? And these 3 pathways are converging to true meaning, okay? And we know as Christians, classically educating, that God is in the center there, right? He's the source of truth, goodness, and beauty. And that's kind of what true learning is. So I thought this was a really helpful graphic. But let's go to the tree, Ben. This is in your packet. Okay, so this kind of walks us through in a really nice, simple way. I think Cindy or Rachel gave this to me, passed this on. But this just walks through in a real simple way the stages of the trivium. So as we kind of take a look at this, and Rachel said what your goal was for your community was to equip. Say it again, equip joyfully and restfully. There was more to it, I know, but right, this is our key to There we go, okay. So what I want to ask you to do for a minute, so that's your goal of your community, to educate your children, and your role as much as possible will be to do that joyfully and restfully with a firm foundation in Christ. What is the goal of education? Because part of that Rachel said was to educate our children. What's the goal of education? So tell somebody at your table or write it down. There's not obviously only one right answer here, but we're going to do a little bit of dialoguing. What's the goal of education? let's share our ideas a little bit. Sorry, I know we can't do a lot of discussion, but does any table, do you have a spokesperson that wants to share what your table said? Okay, great. I don't think we're going to have a wrong answer here. That's great. Anybody else? Any other table? Excellent. And really, again, the convergence, back to the converging, right? There's a graphic that I wish I could have found. I actually, when I was at a parent equipping meeting years ago, and Rachel, I remember talking to you about this one, it was a circle with all the subject matter, if you can kind of visualize with me, all the subject matter around, right? And God is in the center. And there's arrows going from each subject matter, right? And then there's arrows from God going out, right? And then there's arrows from the subject matters pointing in, because he is the definition of truth, right? And all learning. So great, that made me think of that. Any other group want to share what your group said? We had all right answers, but I'm going to add something. And really, this is a major goal of classical education. You want to teach your students how to learn, okay? The grammar stage, as you can see on your graphic here, it's laying the foundation, and it's the building blocks. There's going to be lots of facts, rules. They're going to learn. They're going to observe. They're going to remember, not all of it, but they're going to, and the classical method, it gives us a mode for them to remember, which is one of the beautiful parts of memory work. I know someone's talking about that later. But we're building a foundation so that they can learn anything. It's a methodology, it's a strategy. This is how I learn. When my daughter started nursing school, she went back through the grammar stage, right? We're going through the grammar stage as you learn the new terms of your co-op. If I want to go, I've got this dream, I think I'm going to go learn how to play golf. I mean, it's really kind of funny, but what I'm going to have to do is the grammar of golf that I don't already know, I'm going to need to learn that, right? So we go through these stages. All learners go through these stages. You're going to be equipping your children with a classical education to go through these stages of learning. So really the end goal is that they can learn anything. They're equipped to be a learner. So let's just go ahead and look at I'm going to just kind of go through these real quick, but then we want to talk about each more in depth. The dialectic stage, or also called the logic stage. Who has children in this stage right now? I know my niece is there. Who else? Okay. Well, you're right. So that would be roughly, it's not always exact for each child, but we're talking 5th grade, 11, 12. Okay, isn't life fun? Right? You know the change, right? You see it, right? But really leverage this stage to your advantage. Okay, and we're going to talk about how you can do that soon. The kids are starting to think, reason. Anybody's dialectic children asking why more than they did? And you can't just rattle off something simple and they skip away and are fine with it, okay? They focus on develop logical understanding of the why behind what they know. And then in the rhetoric stage, this is more like the high school years. It's a time to grow in wisdom and apply what they've been learning, through self-expression and communication. So Ben, I think this is 5. We're going to talk a little bit now about the grammar stage. This is where a lot of you are right now, right? Or I know a lot of you probably have, I'm sure you have children in grammar and the dialectic stage. Let's look at this quote. if you want to read kind of like the Bible on classical education, look up The Lost Tools of Learning by Dorothy Sayers. She was a contemporary of C.S. Lewis, and really some of her excerpts are what really convinced me, classical education is not just, this is a great method that someone came up with. This is very key. It is the way children already develop, okay? Nobody created the dialectic stage. Children are already, that's what they go through, whether we like it or not sometimes, right? And so classical learning just facilitates the development that's already there, that's already wired into them by God, okay? So Dorothy Sayers says, so far, except of course for Latin, our curriculum contains nothing that departs very far from common practice. The difference will be felt rather in the attitude of the teachers, who must look upon all these activity lessons less as subjects in themselves than as gathering together of material for use in the next part of the trivium. So you're laying a lot of groundwork, okay? They don't have to understand everything. I know that flies in the face of maybe some other methodologies that you looked at, and we could talk a long time about different methods, and I'm not against using other methods. I had to use them because classical wasn't always really worked well. It didn't always really work well for my one with learning disability, my son with learning disability. However, they don't really have to understand it all deeply. They're not going to. Their brains aren't wired for that. But there's a lot that they can do in this age, and I know that you've already experienced a lot of that. Your role as teacher, you are a source of information. And not that you're going to be telling everything to them, although I know you talk a lot to little ones, but right, you're going to be providing good books, you're going to be providing good resources. You do spend a lot of time talking, building vocabulary and background knowledge. This language actually guides our thinking and learning. Language is key. The classical model uses language in every stage. It's just naturally part of each stage. So we do lots of talking, we do lots of building of knowledge, we do lots of reading, and you're going to help to train the learner to grasp facts and then start to learn to express them in their own words, okay? Now, how are you gonna do a lot of this? Memory work is excellent, and someone's talking about memory work. I love memory work. That's not my role here today, but a community is a great way to do memory work because you have other people to do it with. It's just not as fun. Memory work's not as fun just at home with just yourselves, although it can be done. When we did memory work, I would make up a trifold board with our week, right? And I changed it out every week to what our memory work was, so I could open that trifold board and they could go through their memory work without me. I would use a whiteboard and we would write it and erase. Even if they were beginning readers, you're putting print in front of them all the time, right? And so we would erase keywords out and they would have to say it, and I might erase faster. You're just making memory work a game. If your student's ready for copy work, have them copy. Playing games with keywords is excellent. I'm thinking of a memory from your week. Let's take your memory work. I'm thinking of a piece of memory work that has the words Old Testament, 66, and books, right? And you want to try and get your kiddos to rattle off that memory work. I'm not going to pick out words that don't matter, right? You're going to start modeling for them picking out keywords, which is going to lead to writing in the upper grammar. And then you let them do it back to you, and you help teach them how to pick out keywords. So just make memory work games. Focus on language arts. Okay, that's really the focus of these years. For reading, you want to work on decoding and fluency. You want to work on handwriting. I know this is also another thing we could debate, couldn't we? But you really do want to work on handwriting instruction. And I'm a huge proponent of cursive, so if you want to know why, I'll talk to you later about that. But there are some real advantages to cursive. poetry. Memorize and recite poetry. You're building the brain for memory, right? This is going to be good for you. When I was a tutor, I really felt like my brain was doing better because I was challenging myself, of course, to memorize all the memory work as the tutor. I'm a learner right alongside my students. But poetry, memorization, and recitation, lots of read alouds. This is not going to be hugely a child-directed time. And I know that there's a lot of philosophies out there, and I see points in them, right? You can look from different perspectives and see points in them. But the fact is, children at this age, they don't have the wealth of knowledge to be self-directed. Now, does that not mean, yes, they have interests, right? But they truly are sponges that are absorbing a lot. And yes, we're going to interact with them, and we're not just going to be constantly talking at them, but they just don't have the wealth of knowledge yet. The grammar stage, you're helping to build all of this wealth of knowledge that they're going to use later on in the dialectic and rhetoric stages. I don't really have time to go into comprehension at this stage, but that's a whole important piece that we want to make sure our children are comprehending. And not just what they are reading in print, but what we're saying. So really what you want to do is allow them to narrate back to you when you're reading information to them, to narrate back what they've heard, and you're going to model that through with them. What does that look like? And eventually the narration is going to lead to their own summaries. Okay, but, and this is like a whole subject in and of itself, but how to make sure children are comprehending. I don't recommend worksheets and fill in the blanks, right? We want to be talking with them, hearing what their thoughts are, and helping model pieces of, if you just read them a passage of history, you know, can they help, or can they tell back to you what they heard? And then you start to build, well, what's the main idea of this? Give me some details, okay? So narration and summarization are really two key pieces to comprehending. Whether it's oral, they've auditory or written, whether they've read it. If you really feel like you need help with understanding comprehension and how to do that more, email me. I'd love to talk to you. That's one of my favorite topics. If in the early ages, before they get to IEW, if you're doing narration and summarizations, that is going to lend itself incredibly well to when they get to that, is it 4th grade, that they're going to start IEW, okay? So the main goal in the grammar stage is to make proper use of language. You want it to be second nature to your child, okay? So speaking, listening, it doesn't have to be a ton of writing. It's going to be some, but like you're going to first just take down what they tell you and help train them and teach them in how they digest information. And then they're going to start to learn how to give it back out eventually in those upper grammar years. In math, you want to be concrete. You want to make math part of everyday life. Facts are key. Be consistent. Trust me. For those of you that haven't already experienced that, right? If they don't know their facts, it is going to be tough. Play games. Make it fun. It doesn't just have to be rote memory, okay? And we've all heard the criticisms of memorization. Who's speaking on memory later? Okay, and I'm sure you're going to, are you Kelly? Michelle? Michelle, you're probably going to address that perhaps because there's a lot of criticisms, but we need to know why we're memorizing. I'm sure she's going to give you that. Work on just addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, basic geometry, and how to think through word problems. If your child is having trouble with math when they're working independently, that means they need to come work with you. I know it's tough. Okay, but they're not really going to be independent in this young stage. If you lay the groundwork well and diligently and consistently in this grammar stage, I'm sure the parents who have the logic dialectic stage will tell you they start to be able to do more on their own, don't they? Okay, but the better and more consistent we are at laying this foundation in the grammar stage, they'll be doing more and more. You'll be amazed. You probably will sometimes want to sit with them and they'll be like, I got it. I can go do it on my own, right? The logic stage. Okay, Ben, Rachel, we started a few minutes late, right? Okay, Dorothy Sayers, she actually has different terms. Her terms, I think it's pole and parrot for grammar. Am I right, Cindy? Or parrot and pole. I never remember which way. Have you heard that term? Her terms were pole and parrot, pert, and then poetic for rhetoric. Okay, so all she's talking about here is the logic stage. The pert age is characterized by contradicting, answering back, liking to catch people out, especially one's elders, and by the propounding of conundrums. Its nuisance value is extremely high. Isn't it true for those of you that have these kids? They can be so fun, and you just begin to be amazed at the conversations that you can have with them and what you can talk about. But man, if you're not ready for it, but they're ready for it, it's a whole other story, isn't it? This takes a lot of energy. They do become more independent, but you literally need to be dialoguing a lot with students at this age. The mind is switching gears to move from concrete to more analytic. And I'm sure if you don't have someone in this stage, you've seen this, or maybe you remember it for yourself, right? Dia is the Latin root, meaning across or through. They're getting across and through now, right? By dialoguing in this dialectic stage. They're going to reason through. They want to build arguments. They ask why. In the grammar stage, you might have read about Alexander the Great, which, man, my boys that book was torn apart, I think, But then in the logic or dialectic stage, you're going to be talking about, well, was he really a good leader? Why was he trying to conquer the whole world? That's what you're going to start talking about. But you see how if they have... you're using good resources in the grammar stage. If they've met Alexander the Great, right, they're not doing that in public school. I'm just telling you right now. That could be a whole other conversation too. But we are giving our children interesting stories and resources in the grammar stage and classics that have stood the test of time. That's part of this great conversation that you might sometimes see that term in classical education, because your children need to be able to, or we want them to be able to enter the great conversation of what is truth, what is beauty, what is good, what is right, what is wrong. And we're using history and literature, right, to make that happen. So if they've read, I just remember the Usborne book. It was excellent. It was Alexander the Great. Well, then when they're in the dialectic stage, they can start reasoning through because they've already met him. They're already familiar with him. My boys loved the Iliad and the Odyssey. It blew my mind because, I thought of it, honestly, like a publicly educated person. Like, that was just beyond me, and I was even in some honors classes. It was too hard to grapple with. When you're using the classical method and you're building on what's already programmed into them by God, they're meeting these amazing stories and these interesting periods in history and events in history. They're meeting it at a young age, and then you're building again and you're building again. They're not scared of the Iliad or the Odyssey when they get to high school, right? Because it was a picture book in the grammar stage, and then they might have used another resource at the dialectic stage. The children at this age, students at this age, are connecting dots and discovering relationships, okay? So this is why there has to be so much dialogue. At home, take the time to do lots of modeling, and this is where Dad's going to play a major role, right? Because when Mom's tired of talking all day, Dad's going to hopefully come home and do a lot of this dialoguing too. You want to teach them to argue well. They are going to argue. It's guaranteed, right? Depending on their personality. But I probably haven't met a 12 or 13-year-old that hasn't argued to some degree. Teach them to do it well. This is naturally wired in them. We want them to be able to argue well as adults, defending their faith or whatever it might be, right? Leading someone to Christ. And we think of that word argue in a negative way. It's not negative, right? But we want them to learn how to be able to do this well. And you are the key person in this stage to help teach them that. And it's not that you're saying, well, next you do this and next you do this, although in community they'll learn how to argue well, right? That can be taught. But you're just doing lots of modeling and giving them opportunity to verbalize. Again, their language is always important. They're verbalizing their thinking process to you, and they're going to be developing how to write persuasively and argumentatively too. Some good questions to ask. Explain your thinking, explain your reasoning, explain your answer, right? Do it with a genuine curiosity. I want to hear about that. Explain your reasoning. Ask them, why do you think that? Listen to their thinking, right? If they have to start to verbalize it, wow, that's a whole nother level, right? Than just, well, it's just what I think. That's not an answer. No, why do you think that? How have you come to your conclusion? Defend your answer. How do you know? Convince me. Now, obviously, you're the parent, right? So depending on what you're arguing about, they can convince you all they want, but you still have the God-given authority to make the final decisions. But do you see, right? We see how we can really leverage this stage, especially when we can just stay calm in it and truly just have a dialogue with them. And you know when you're up for that and you're not, right? But it's just becomes so powerful for you to ask good questions so that they have to formulate their reasoning orally. That's a major part of this stage. They're going to study logic, fallacies, analogies. Like I said, you want to help them learn to formulate good questions, and you want to help them learn to pursue answers. They're going to come up with lots of good questions. You do not have to know it all, and your tutor doesn't have to know it all, right? The job of the tutor is not expert. That is a difference about the classical style. Now, obviously, when you get into the rhetoric stage, and if you move on in college, and you have tutors, especially if they were trained in classical themselves, they're going to be really excellent at what they do. But if they have good questions, you help equip them to find the answers, to dig in, right? You're a facilitator and a guide largely in this. They're going to need to continue to write. Please use good resources, okay? There's a lot out there. You might say, I'm not equipped. Most parents, that's the big area that they get to at some point, and they say, I'm just not equipped to help them with this writing. There are resources out there. And use them and be a learner right alongside with them. I remember doing a few writing assignments myself because I wanted to challenge myself to see what are my writing skills, right? I went to college and did some graduate work, but where am I really with my own writing skills? Because you're a student and a learner right alongside of them. Okay. Real quickly, I joked with Rachel. I said, well, I didn't really get fully through the rhetoric stage in true classical. My community ended up, the older years sort of just dissolved because we didn't have tutor to take that role. It's one of the reasons I love what Rachel and Cindy are doing, right? So my kids didn't finish out through rhetoric. I have evaluated several students who have, and man, it just really blows my mind when I sit with them at the end of the year at the evaluation and see what they've done. One student went on to Wilson Hill Academy. Her parents wanted to, employ the classical method, and there was nothing for them, and so she did it online, and it worked amazingly. So there are resources out there to help us get through this rhetoric stage. Aristotle, right, kind of like definitely the master, said, it's absurd to hold that a man should be ashamed of an inability to defend himself with his limbs, And of course, right, we're in a time period when men would have been doing that, right? But not ashamed of an inability to defend himself with speech and reason, for the use of rational speech is more distinctive of a human being than the use of his limbs. You can shut it down. So this is a time of self-expression, whether we like it or not. And we see it all the time in the high schoolers around us, don't we? We see them expressing themselves. The classical model equips and gives the student the tools to be expressing themselves, defending what they think, reasoning through when they get to that stage. Now, that doesn't mean your child's not going to want to dye their hair purple, right? But it does mean that you're going to be equipping them, honestly, right, in a way that the culture's not doing. Like Ben said when he prayed. I mean, and I know I don't have to tell you all this, but what you're doing is so significant because our culture, and honestly, you know, my kids are 18 to 24. You all are facing some things that I didn't in the grammar stages. It's like, you know, everything has like just, the culture has just exponentially sped up. It's not for us to fear, right? God will provide what you need. He's provided you with a community. And really press in and utilize your community in this, especially in this stage, the whole way through, but especially in this stage. I love that. Is it Mama Bear Apologetics, right? That author, I mean, her like mission in life is to, right, we know the statistics of kids that leave the church and all that kind of thing. I would argue you really have to be doing it definitely in the dialectic stage, because sometimes if kids don't know what they believe in the rhetoric, and even so, they go through their own, right? They start to understand and reason in different ways, and they start to poke holes, right? Your job is to do the best you can, okay? To equip them, but it's not a guarantee. We all know that, right? It's not always a guarantee. God's in control, but you are going to be providing them with all that you can for them to walk this out, to believe what you are imparting on them in a young age, and to keep moving forward in that. And the rhetoric stage really starts to challenge that, okay? They can start to learn something new. They can start to dig in deeper. Many times you start to see students, really get into an interest. This is where you really start to see that happen. I loved that one thing I read by Dorothy Sayers was, if they're not going to use, basically I'm paraphrasing her, if they're not going to use mathematics, higher level mathematics, it's okay, right? They don't have to keep going with it. This is where sometimes there's, I think, a mistake, is that we think that classical education has to be so highly rigorous the whole way through. Not necessarily. If they're not going to need the upper sciences, it's okay. Don't try to make them become a master of that, because your child's going to be wired to want to become a master of what's in them to become a master of. Does that make sense? The end goal that at this stage is they're going to be able to evaluate for themselves what is true, good, and beautiful, right? I will share, I have my son who, oddly enough, is at Grove City, which is an excellent Christian college, is not solid in his faith. He doesn't know what he believes. Now, this has been probably the hardest thing I've ever faced as an adult, I would say, because, as homeschoolers, we pour ourselves into this, don't we? I mean, yeah, what you're doing daily is just remarkable. And then here I have it. No, it's funny, right? God's in control. This child's at Grove City, just all on his own. Okay, but what do we know? What do I hold on to? First of all, obviously, that God is guiding his path. He has to go down his journey, right? I think I'm saying this not to scare anybody, but as being a little older, quite a bit older than some of you, but all of you, you are doing the absolute best that you can, right? God has given you community. God's given you one another. God's laid out a path. Hopefully you feel a little bit better to walk this path. after today. I think you definitely will. But he is in control of where our kiddos go, right? And honestly, I'm still going through these dialectic and rhetoric conversations with my son. It's not over. What can I rest in? I can joyfully rest in God. Can I? Because I did not always model a joyful and restful homeschool, but I stuck to what, and you are going to stick to what God's called you to do. You're going to do your very best every day. You're going to lean on one another, reach out to one another, call a friend when you need to. If it's not feeling joyful, that's okay, right? God's grace is covering it. But you're going to keep, what I know is I kept to the task that he gave me to do. And he's going to be faithful, right? And that's what's going to happen for you all. So you don't have to have all the answers. It doesn't have to look perfect. I hope you know that. But you are going to enjoy the journey. And really, I'm just going to wrap up with Rachel, maybe in the spring, I guess, said, "Oh, Becky, I need to talk to you, this is what's happening. This is what's happening with Abby." I've been down a similar path, right, with my own experience with my community. And she's telling me all these things that are going through her head. And I think I said something really profound like, "Rachel, it seems like a no-brainer." Didn't I say that? I think that's what I said. But I really, with that conversation and talking to Cindy too, I really believe that God has really brought this together and allowed this community to happen. I'm very excited for you all to have this. And I want you to know I'm available. If Rachel can give you my contact, I get lots of calls, I get lots of emails, and lots of times what I do is just cheer moms on, because we need that, and I can do that for you. Last thing, I meant to say this at the beginning, a couple great resources, maybe you've seen this. The Well-Trained Mind, this was the first book I ever read, and I didn't read a whole lot on classical education, because once I did my research and saw some things by Dorothy Sayers, I was pretty much sold. As an educator, as a learner myself, right? It just makes sense. But this is an excellent book. She has everything's in here. Suggested resources. I wouldn't use all of what she's done, but this is a great resource. This is in the library system, okay? This is a good one too, because you're going to be reading so much. How to Read a Book by Mortimer Adler. This is a classic. It's really funny to me because, man, my son I did not make this required reading. He picked this up and read it on his own, okay? This is the one at Grove City. And here's his outline, right? Here's his outlining. And when I picked this up today to bring it, that just made me laugh, right? But there's good resources out there. So just make use of what you have. Any questions real quick? I know I went over. Sorry.
Who's that How to Read a Book by?
Mortimer Adler, Adler. And he has some other really good stuff, too. But this is old. The Classic Guide to Intelligent Reading, because really, they're going to be doing a lot of that, right? Any other thoughts or questions or things? I know I went through things really fast, but hopefully, do you feel a little bit... Anybody that maybe didn't have a good grasp, do you feel a little bit more clear? Right? You'll keep learning, right? We put some pegs in today. Somebody's going to talk about this too later, probably with memory work. We put some pegs in, and then you're going to hang more as you learn and keep growing in your classical walk. Okay. Yes. Yes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It really is. Mm-hmm. Yes. It's one of the benefits of being in community, right? Because it's going to help you remain on the classical path. And that's to say, if you decide you need to, diverge off, that's okay. But I feel like in homeschooling in general, community is super important. But to be with like-minded people, I'm all for heterogeneous grouping and not being with people just like you. But there's really something powerful about being in a small community with people who are like-minded in what they're doing, not just in their faith, definitely, but also in the way you're going about this, and that can really help you. I watched people throw classical out the window too soon. It doesn't work that way. You're not going to see the benefits unless you really stick in it and start to move into the next stages with your students. Yeah.
Let's take a 5-minute break before we talk about how we are going to do this restfully. So I'll get some water out, take a break, and if you didn't do a raffle, what do you just tear it off and keep one and put one in? All right, so make sure you put a raffle in, and we'll draw an item before we get started with the restful segment. So.